Dad handed over his business to my brother Bill at his retirement party instead of me, all because he was disappointed in me 2 years prior. After years of hard work and dedication, my father stepped down from his role as CEO of the lab equipment company he had built from the ground up. For nearly 7 years, he had promised me that I would be his successor. Yet, on the day of his retirement celebration, he announced that my brother-in-law, Zach, would assume the CEO position. I was taken aback, particularly since I had organized the entire party, blissfully unaware that this shocking announcement was looming. I joined the applause from everyone else, but my heart sank as I confronted him afterward. He coldly explained that he had his reasons for letting me down. According to him, Zach, at 34, had become more of a son to him than I ever was. In his eyes, I had become a disappointment. It stung deeply, especially since Zach had only been involved in the business for about a year, while I had dedicated 7 years of my life to it. I had known Zach for quite some time, as he had been with my sister, who is now 33, for nearly 5 years. When Dad retired, I had worked closely with him, and I knew Zach was a decent guy, but I couldn't fathom why Dad believed him to be more of a son than his own flesh and blood. When I pressed my father for an explanation, he uttered the most bewildering words I could imagine, causing me to lose all respect for him in that moment. He remarked that it was an agonizing decision for him, but ultimately he had to act in the best interests of the company. He claimed that someone like me, whom he labeled mentally weak, could never be an effective leader. It was then that the pain cut even deeper. He thought I had too much in common with him, which had somehow sealed my fate. When he called me mentally weak, he was referring to my general anxiety disorder, which I had shared with my family a couple of months before his retirement party. That night, during a family dinner, I had accidentally dropped a small container of my anxiety medication on the table. I had to explain the situation to my parents. My mother handled it with grace, but my dad? He was less supportive. His overarching belief in the virtue of toughness meant he saw mental health issues as weaknesses, not struggles to be understood. After I revealed my anxiety, he began losing faith in me. It's essential to point out that my anxiety had never interfered with my work. I believed I had consistently proven my capability to lead. In fact, I was certain many others in upper management dealt with similar challenges and managed to do so without letting it interfere with their responsibilities. But to Dad, my acknowledgement of my condition was merely an excuse for my failure. His worries convinced him that I was unwilling to confront my shortcomings, and in his mind, the decision was made clear. Zach would take over the business instead of me. He had led me to believe I would be the next CEO all along, yet it was evident he had made his decision long before the retirement party. The betrayal hurt deeply. That night, I left the gathering early, wounded, and unable to speak to my father again. It was a chasm that felt insurmountable. Ultimately, it was his company, and he was free to select whoever he deemed fit for the role. I was shattered and disappointed, but I tried to respect his choice. I didn't want to remain in an environment brimming with that kind of disrespect, so I decided it was time to move on. Within weeks, I found a new job, distancing myself from the family dynamics that had become so tangled. The only person I kept in touch with was my mother. When my sister learned that my resignation stemmed from the pain of not being chosen as CEO, she took it personally, which I could understand. Later, she asked me to support Dad, leading to a disagreement that strained our relationship. Since then, I hadn't spoken to him, my sister, or Zach, a triad of silence that weighed heavily on me. I still checked in with my mom, though. We met at least once a month, where she often urged me to mend things with my father, but the thought didn't appeal to me. Then, about a week ago, my mother called in a panic. She informed me that Zach had been implicated in tax fraud and had been arrested. To make matters worse, my dad was now being investigated due to his connection with the company. I found that deeply troubling, but I was unsure how to react. My mother insisted that I should reach out to my dad, sort things out, and even offer to testify for him if necessary. I hesitated, recalling my history with the company. I told her I would not be getting involved, emphasizing my past experiences that had taught me to walk away from a hurtful situation. I was pretty sure that if my dad was under investigation, it would inevitably cast a shadow over the company too. If Zach had committed fraud, that was a serious matter, and I didn't want to delve into the specifics. All I knew was that the farther I distanced myself from this chaotic mess, the better off I would be. I made my feelings very clear to my mother. I had no intention of getting involved at all. I told her that if my father was being scrutinized, the other higher-ups in the company would likely come under investigation eventually. I didn't want to get bogged down in details, but again I stressed that staying away from this was my best option. He really wanted my help, so he should have reached out to me himself. After all, he was the one who needed me, so why should I be the one to make the first move? That's when my mother began to accuse me of being childish. She insisted that, instead of acting petty, I needed to communicate with my father and clear the air. She emphasized that this situation wouldn't be easy for our family, and now more than ever, we needed to present a united front. I found her perspective unreasonable, so I stood my ground and said I would decide what to do. I told her I absolutely would not contact my father no matter what. That upset her, and she labeled me as selfish and heartless, claiming I was still fixated on what happened 2 years ago. I felt it was insensitive for her to say that, especially since I believed she wouldn't have handled it any differently if the roles were reversed. I couldn't imagine how difficult it would be for anyone, especially her, to forgive my father after all he had done. Picture working tirelessly for nearly 7 years toward a goal, only to be overlooked in such a hurtful way. It's out of your control, and expecting someone to forgive so easily is unreasonable. My father had never even attempted to show remorse for how he treated me. I firmly believe that no one can truly forgive someone who doesn't express regret. I understand that it's tough to forgive someone who hasn't shown any sign of remorse. My mother and I had a passionate discussion about this, and eventually I suggested that perhaps what was happening now to Zach and my father was a form of karma, a reflection of their past actions. After a while, my mother fell silent, and ultimately she ended the call. Regret washed over me for saying something that might have hurt her feelings, so I resolved to call her back a couple of hours later. However, when I tried, I realized she had blocked me. Now, that feeling of guilt lingered, especially with my remarks about my dad being in the wrong. A week has gone by since my mother blocked me, and I haven't been able to reach out to her. I'm trying not to dwell on it, but frankly, I feel adrift without her. She was the only person in my family maintaining contact with me for the last 2 years, and now, without her, I feel incredibly lost and alone. Sure, I have friends who are supportive and ready to help, but it just isn't the same. She was my rock, and now that support is gone. It's a struggle to navigate this situation, and while I want to reconnect with her, I remain steadfast that I haven't done anything wrong. What I said was justified. It felt like karma for the way my father had treated me. I've had a tough time with my mental health recently, but I'm on the mend now. As I said before, my personal challenges haven't affected my leadership skills or my performance at work. Despite what my father said, I am not a disappointment. His words from the night of his retirement party still haunt me, but I'm learning to put them behind me. I have faced some mental health challenges, but I'm actively seeking help and making progress. There were moments of self-doubt, a nagging sense of imposter syndrome at my new workplace. It took time to overcome that, and I'm still in therapy to resolve lingering issues. Thankfully, my work has remained unaffected, for which I'm truly grateful. I strive to be one of the best employees at my job, and there are plans for my promotion soon. I genuinely believe my father made a colossal mistake, and it's difficult when my mother doesn't seem to recognize that. It's disheartening that she chooses to stand by him now. The hurt he caused me runs deep, and I wish my mom understood that none of this is my fault. It's frustrating that she's siding with my dad instead of urging him to apologize to me. Instead, she thinks I should take the initiative to mend things. I don't know why she thinks this way, but I refuse to lift a finger for the family until they sincerely apologize and promise to do better. It's confounding to me that she believes I should be the one to make amends first. I won't be used again for their selfish interests. Today, my sister came over for a visit, and it was quite tense. She was in hysterics, wanting me to help her because her husband was in serious trouble. Honestly, I don't even know what they expect from me. I'm stuck in a tough position here. This is a federal crime, and I genuinely don't think I can do anything to help them. When I saw how distraught she appeared, I invited her in, hoping to offer some kindness. I'm not heartless. I can't just slam the door shut on someone who is suffering so deeply. But there she was, crying on my shoulder and insisting she had no idea any of this was happening. She told me that had she known, she would have put a stop to it immediately. Then she confided in me how worried she was about what would happen to him and asked if I could use my connections to bail him out. I regretfully explained that I didn't have any connections that could help in this situation. But then she brought up something that our father had said. Apparently, one of my bosses is married to a federal judge, and she was hopeful I might speak to my boss to do something for them. She even suggested they would be willing to pay whatever it took just for me to connect them with my boss and, by extension, his wife. I thought that was incredibly out of line, not just for her to ask but to expect me to do it. I firmly told her no and asked if she could please leave me alone. I had thought she came seeking emotional support, but this was a different matter entirely. I refused to encourage or entertain this notion. There were several reasons for my refusal. The The primary one was that I didn't want my bosses thinking I was connected to a family involved in fraud. More critically, I have my own personal code of morals and ethics, and I couldn't stand the thought of anything bad happening to my sister. But if Zach were indeed guilty of tax fraud, I had no intention of getting tangled up in helping him or trying to sway the situation in his favor. At this point, it wasn't even personal, it was simply about not wanting to become embroiled in this mess. All I could offer them was emotional support. It would be unreasonable for them to expect me to go any further when I had already said no and asked her to leave. My sister sulked, saying she couldn't believe I was still holding a grudge against her husband for something that wasn't even his fault. I tried explaining that this wasn't about that. In fact, I had never blamed him for what had happened with my father. It was my father's decision to give him that position. I would have been perfectly happy for him to take over the company. If I were in his shoes, I likely would have accepted that role too without giving any thought to who truly deserved it. So, yes, perhaps I resented him a little, but I certainly didn't blame him. I didn't hold a grudge against him. He simply wasn't important enough in my life for that. I tried to express my feelings, but she refused to listen. She insisted that our mother had been right. It was pointless to talk to me because I was still being petty. We both had our selfish moments, which led to a heated disagreement. I suggested she leave my house, explaining that she couldn't just waltz in and hurl insults at me after everything we had been through. I had offered her comfort, yet she hadn't shown me the same kindness during my tough times. In fact, she had even fought with me back then because she took it personally. 2 years later, we were still in the same place. If anyone had been petty and selfish, it was my family. Her comment about our mother being right stung deeply. I felt hurt by her words. For the past 2 years, she had been the only one there for me, and it felt like she was merely pretending to care. My heart was already heavy, and my sister refused to leave. She kept standing there saying things that cut deep. Eventually, we were both shouting so loudly that we couldn't even hear one another. We ended up cursing at each other, but finally she stormed out and I felt terrible. I'm so worried about everything they're going through, yet I sense they're dealing with some incredibly tough situations. I'm starting to think it might have been better if I had cut ties with my family a long time ago. I regret trying to be there for my sister when she was acting so hysterically. I no longer believe they're worth my time or energy, and they keep reminding me why that is. I'm wrestling with the decision to let them go, but letting go seems impossibly hard. I've been reflecting on our childhood quite a bit lately. I miss the closeness we once shared, and it's challenging for me to talk about it. All of this is proving to be really tough, and I wish it would all come to an end soon. Update 3. It's been 4 long days since my sister visited, and our fight still lingers in the air like a dark cloud. After that altercation, no one reached out to me, which led me to believe they might leave me alone for good. But today my parents finally showed up. By then I had resolved not to let them in. I had already made the mistake of allowing my sister in before, something that ended poorly. I didn't want to repeat that same mistake. They stood outside the door and I firmly told them to leave. I felt there was nothing left to say. I was convinced they couldn't possibly have anything new to add to our ongoing saga, so I thought it best to save us both from wasting time and simply move on. But then my dad spoke up. He insisted he wasn't there to ask for my help. Rather, he came to apologize. He had finally realized after all this time that he had made a mistake. He said something I found hard to accept. He knew I was hurting and could have tried to mend things back then, but he didn't. I was caught off guard because I had expected a more intense reaction from him. We hadn't spoken since the night of his retirement party, a night I remember vividly because of the disappointment he called me. I'll always carry that moment with me, even with his apology. Honestly, I wasn't sure if I could forgive him. I told him I appreciated his visit, but that I needed time. Apologies don't magically erase hurt feelings. While I was thankful he had made the effort to come all this way, forgiveness wasn't going to come easily to me. I explained that I needed time to process everything, and even then I was uncertain about whether I could ever forgive him. It wasn't just about the past that bothered me, it was the realization that it took him 2 years to recognize his mistakes and reach out. That left me feeling deeply saddened. I had hoped he would unleash his anger and yell, but instead, he said he was ready to wait until I was ready to talk. He assured me he would accept it, even if I chose never to speak to him again or grant him forgiveness. He acknowledged that he had made a foolish decision 2 years ago. It wasn't that he didn't care about my mental health, rather he took it too lightly. He explained that in his family, emotions were brushed aside. Men were raised to believe you had to tough it out in life. He thought anyone who spoke of anxiety, depression, or any struggles was simply weak and making excuses. So when he discovered that I was taking antidepressants, his concerns spiraled into paranoia. He began to doubt my ability to lead the company he built from the ground up, fearing it would crumble under my watch. I think that anxiety clouded his judgment, ultimately leading us to this fractured relationship. After we stopped communicating, he wrestled with anger and resentment toward me for a couple of months. Eventually, he started questioning himself and dedicated time to understand anxiety better. Just a couple of months ago, he wondered if he might be experiencing symptoms himself. He intended to reach out and mend things, but the situation with Zach intervened, halting his plans. As he shared his thoughts with me, I felt a swirl of emotions. I know I have many feelings to untangle and I'm still navigating them. At the very least, he has come to apologize. I realize this may feel small after 2 years, but it holds significant weight for me. I can't predict whether I'll forgive him anytime soon, and truthfully, I'm still uncertain if his apology was genuine. But I'm willing to give it a chance. For now, I told him to head home and that I would reach out later. I promised I would think things over and give him a shot. He accepted that graciously and left. As for my mom, we didn't get much time to talk today. She did apologize at the beginning for both her and my father's actions. Toward the end of my conversation with Dad, she expressed her willingness to wait for my forgiveness. She admitted she may have reacted too quickly and too harshly instead of trying to understand what I was experiencing. She also mentioned that she had spoken to my sister and wanted to extend an apology on her behalf. She felt that my sister had treated me poorly in the past too. But to be honest, I'm not inclined to consider that a true apology. My sister is an adult and can speak for herself if she chooses to. If she wants to apologize, she'll have to do it herself. I understand she's trying to navigate everything related to Zach right now. But that doesn't excuse the way she treated me. I get why she might be struggling with everything, but it still doesn't justify her behavior the last time she was here. The truth is, most of my family members have apologized to me, and now it's my choice to accept their apologies or not. I won't lie, it's a tough decision. I've been mulling it over for 2 whole days. I've had 2 years to deliberate on this and I'm still uncertain about my feelings. I truly want to forgive everyone and move on with my life. Holding on to resentment won't help me. I've spent too many years dwelling on these issues and I want to be free from that. Still, I'm not sure if forgiveness is the right path. To be honest, I miss my family a lot and all of this is weighing heavily on me. I know some people might think they're only reaching out because they're in trouble, but I've made it clear that's not the case. I just want to establish that I cannot help them, and even if I could, I wouldn't. This is about personal principles for me and I won't change those for anyone. If they're hoping for me to reconsider, they're setting themselves up for disappointment. I genuinely wish I could help, but it's simply not possible. This isn't something I'm willing to compromise on no matter what. If they're waiting for me to change, they're bound for failure. I realize they might not fully understand this, that they're genuinely trying to apologize and repair what's been broken between us. That adds an extra layer of complexity. I plan to sleep on it for a couple of days and really think about what I want to do moving forward. I'll keep you all in the loop. Update 4. Hey everyone, I finally managed to log in here after almost 4 months. Life got really busy in the meantime. I'll explain why later. Anyway, the last time I posted, my parents and my sister had just apologized to me. My sister came by in person and I truly appreciated her effort. I know she was still grappling with everything surrounding Zach, which is entirely understandable. She wanted to ensure our mother was okay before reaching out to me on her behalf. A couple of weeks after that, she paid me a visit and offered her apology in person. I told her I needed time to think about it, and that I would eventually share my decision with her. I took my time, and last month I finally told them that I wanted to rebuild our relationship, but it had to happen at my own pace. I expressed that I'd be happy to have dinner with them once a month and see how things develop from there. I'm still unsure whether rekindling our relationship is the right choice, but they were thrilled and assured me they were okay with it as long as I was happy. So that's where things stand now. We had dinner together a couple of weeks ago, and while it was a bit awkward, I could see they were genuinely trying to make amends by being especially kind to me. Zach wasn't there because my sister filed for a divorce from him 2 months ago, and he'd already been let go from the company. My dad kindly offered to make me the CEO, but I turned it down. I feel like I need a bit more time to sort things out. So, for now, my dad is managing the company and he's still waiting for my answer. I plan to take a couple more months to think it over, and then I'll let you know my decision. Meanwhile, I'm focusing on making time for the things I love, including my girlfriend. She's an old friend whom I started dating a couple of months ago, and that's what's kept me so busy. Now, my life has more depth beyond work and family drama. She's even the one who encouraged me to forgive my family and give them a second chance, and I'm truly grateful we're together. I never had the courage to ask her out, even though I've liked her for so long. I was afraid of getting rejected and potentially ruining our friendship. I'm so glad she took that first step. Now we're together and I couldn't be happier. Things are going pretty well for me right now.